So is that something we can do on our own if you're not in a meeting?
Someone in the meeting will have to be a host,
Okay,
and that would be what we would have to figure that out. Either give one of you the password, or arrange ahead of time if we can figure out how to do it to assign one of you as host of the meeting, which is experimentation we can do at a later date.
okay. So I guess we don't have a chair, but the meeting is probably just called to order. Any objections to that? So does everybody have the agenda?
Yep.
And I guess we do conflict of interest declarations. I have none that I know of.
I have no conflict of interest.
I have none.
I have none.
And
But
Bill?
I would like to formally propose that Nancy chair this meeting.
I agree.
That's
No
a-
objections?
that's a
Are there
motion.
any objections to that?
No, but thank you for that.
Okay, well, I would accept becoming chair. Thank you, if that's okay with everybody. So this is kind of a getting to know you discussion. We got to know each other slightly when we were being elected, but we were just talking to Michael about his move to a multi-generational home 2 months ago, and that sounds exciting. I'm in the process. My husband and I are in the process of remodeling our house, so I kind of know what you're going through, Michael. We're tackling the upstairs next. It's phase 3, and we're having to move all sorts of everything out. And so, in a way, it's like a move. We've been in this house since 1986, and there's a lot that we need to get rid of, I think. But so we will be going through that phase, and then it will be nice to have it done.
Ours was 1985, and
Yeah.
yeah, so I know exactly what you're going through. It's unbelievable. I had no idea.
Yeah.
The most difficult part is I'm a pianist. I've been playing the piano since I was 4 years old, and it's a big deal with me. I practice every day, and after I retired, I bought a really nice Steinway grand piano, and so in selecting a home, that was the primary criterion. Where do you put the piano?
Sounds like you were able to find one.
Well, not only that, but to convince my kids and grandkids that Poppy gets to practice when Poppy chooses.
Oh. So, Bill, you just got back from a long bicycle trip, huh? Through Canada?
I did Canada and Banff bicycling, and then hiking in Glacier National Park in Montana.
Awesome.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
Couple of weeks, a little over 2 weeks, plus some travel time. It was beautiful. The Rockies are quite majestic. We've got beautiful. It's just a completely different experience.
We just spent a week. Yeah, we just spent a week at Glacier as well. My husband worked there in summers. Every couple of years we go for a reunion trip, although it's been since 2018 with various factors. But it's an incredible park, isn't it? And
were you able to stay in the park? Or?
We were. I know where you're asking. We had to make reservations July 31st of last year at 11 p.m. to get reservations for this year in August.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gotten harder and harder to do that. We stayed at
Swift Current. At where?
Swift Current Motor Inn. It's close to Mini Glacier.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's pretty. I spent a day hiking in Mini Glacier. Quite lovely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Tom and Wyatt, would you like to share anything about yourselves? And sounds like you're part of the Nescoin community.
Yeah, I moved here. We moved 4 times in the last 8 years, so I'm entirely sympathetic. 2 of them across the Pacific. So
can you adjust your camera just a tiny bit? All we can see is your glasses.
Is that better?
That's perfect.
Yeah. So 2 times across the Pacific. So we've culled down our detrite us significantly. So we don't have quite a bit of the stuff we used to have.
Your children will thank you later.
Yes.
Yes, they will. They already have.
Why
And
are you
do-
moving back and forth across the Pacific?
No, we're done doing that. We did it for 4 years, and we came here in 2018 and looked around, and then in 2019 moved over to Newport initially, and then looked up and down the coast for a place to settle, and Nescoin was it. So we're here and have been here since March of 2020.
Good timing.
Great choice.
Yeah,
Well, our move history is we sort of gradual. We were in one house for 35 years and then another for 12. And now we've been here for almost 4 years in Nesquin. Most of the previous 2 were in Texas, which is a place that I'm glad not to be right now. But we had been visiting here in this area for many years. And our son bought a piece of property up on South Beach Road, and then the property adjacent became available. So I said, well, we're going to build there. Why don't you build there too? So I said, oh, fine. So we did. They're still in Texas. So we're hoping that they will join us soon.
So you and Tom are both full-time Nesquin residents?
Yep. The Toms are, I guess, yes.
How about you, Bill?
No, we just have a vacation home there, but I've had it since 1960, family home. Vacation there before that. So I've played a lot of golf, built a lot of sand castles, done a lot of boogie boarding at Nesquin over the years. But it's a different experience if you're full-time. You have, I think, a different view of Nesquin and the community, and that's one of the interesting things for the NCAC to sort through.
Yes.
I think it's fairly interesting about the aspect of the community. I'm getting a real sense of being in a community, which is something we didn't have before. We lived in a suburb of Dallas initially, and then out in a place, believe it or not, called Farmersville, which really was Farmersville. It was out in the country. So there was sort of the opposite extreme. But here, beginning to know local people and walking into a restaurant and you want your usual. That's really pretty cool. We really enjoy it.
That's great.
I say we, my wife Ann and I.
Yeah, the Nesquin is just so special. I can remember when we would vacation there over the years and how the weather would be great in Nesquin, and you'd go to Lincoln City 10 miles away and it would be overcast and rainy. It's like a magical weather retreat there a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And a nice sense of community. So for those of you who are joining, welcome. And we've sort of just, I guess, with no objections, Michael had nominated me as chair, and there were no objections to that, and I accepted. So that's what we're doing. Michael, would you be interested in being scribe?
I'll be glad to take that on. I love the title scribe. It's an interesting. It's non-committal.
Is there anybody else who would prefer to be scribe or would like to step up to that?
I have absolutely no objection. I do have a comment that perhaps we might need if we decide that, or if the CAC in general decides that bylaws do need to be changed. I think an editor position is probably appropriate as well. Those are really 2 different functions.
Can you explain?
We do have changes. Okay. An editor is going to, that's assuming that there are going to be changes. Now, that's an assumption.
I think we could probably assume that.
Well, I try to be careful about making assumptions and at least identify them. We have well, we had 100 people at the last NCAC meeting. So we potentially have a fair number of people who want to comment on the current bylaws, and there's apparently some dissatisfaction, at least on some people's part, about the process or the Constitution and all that. So if we have changes, they're probably going to be appropriate to open it up comments to everyone and put out a request for comments. And then we would need to field those comments and see how they apply to a large draft. Well, it's not large draft, it's only 7 pages, but see how they apply to it, do the record who's commented, what comments are made on those comments, then provide the context where this committee can decide, yes, we agree with this, or no, we don't agree with this, and then pass that recommendation on to the board, to the chair. We don't get to decide what goes in and out of the comments, but we do make recommendations. That's according to the current bylaws. So
Right.
And it goes to the county attorney to edit, to make sure that it adheres to county guidelines and law.
yes, well, I'm just talking about, does that happen before it goes to the board? Because according to the bylaws, we report to the board, to the chair.
So my understanding from the bylaws is that we come up with a recommendation that then goes to the board and the membership, and then after that goes back to the county attorney, and then it comes for editing, and then comes back to do a final report. Is that correct? But I think we're getting into process, and I hear you, Tom, that you're recommending an editor position, but I'm wondering if we could defer that to the process and then decide after we talk about the process of deciding if we need an editor.
Fair enough.
Is that okay? Or for now, for scribe, I guess what I was envisioning was just someone to make sure that notes of our meetings are being kept, not as formally as a secretary, but if Jeff, I noticed your light came on, your video came on. If you feel like we need a formal secretary position, or if that's something you would be doing as part of the NCAC directly, but we do need someone to maintain just some notes as we're going along. I think we're going to have a lengthy process discussion, I think, today, because we do need to get all of that defined.
I popped in because I'm going to pop in wherever you're sorting out things where you need to interact with me, and so I think to adhere to OPML, like some sort of meeting notes will be needed to be posted publicly, and that seems like fall on the scribe. And I don't think that needs to be super onerous, but if you write down for your own purposes what was decided in a meeting and what the action items are and who's responsible for what, and then and we make that public, I think that's fine. But the scribe will want to work with me on like how to get those. I think probably we want to give you a page on the NCA website and have all your stuff there.
That's actually
and we may also it's so
under our process discussion as well. I think I would
scribe
to do that.
Bill, I guess you got nominated or not and yes, Michael, sorry, and Michael got nominated, so just
I've already started.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And just pass maybe reach out to me when after the meeting, and we'll figure out what to do.
Yes. Okay. No problem.
So there was a distinction made by Nancy between informal notes and minutes. I'm not sure I understand the difference there and what impact that has on the public meeting law.
So we have a couple attorneys here, I think, including you.
Yeah. Well, I was an attorney.
Okay, so I am not an attorney, but my very poor understanding of Oregon public meeting law, we have to put something up, but it doesn't necessarily have to be labeled minutes. It just has to be a recording of what happened. So as long as it's covers what happened, and I think if it covers it for your purposes, so that you have a document that you all can agree to, like this is what happened, and this is who's going to go work on this and that stuff, that should be sufficient.
I guess to answer, I guess my feeling of it is that we're going to have more notes and then ultimately formal recommendations. And minutes to me are very brief. They include the start and stop time, the who is present, any decisions that are made or recommendations through motions, and certain reports, but not every comment. Whereas
Right.
in our notes, I think having comments is probably going to be helpful, particularly if there's a recommendation coming into a comment, and capturing. So like later we have on the agenda brainstorming, we have process discussion. All those notes would be appropriate that might not be appropriate in minutes. So that's where I was seeing a difference, Bill. But if you feel like we should look at having a more formal secretary type position, we could do that. I'm certainly open to any discussion on that.
I question whether in fact Jeff's recording constitutes enough of a record to meet the public meetings law that we don't have to worry about that formality.
You're one of the two attorneys here, so if you think so, I'm willing to go with your opinion.
I'm a recovering attorney,
Okay.
so
Well, I'm a never have been an attorney, so I am definitely more poorly equipped to address that question than you are. So.
To your credit, Jeff.
Yeah.
So if we could, are there any objections to having a scribe position?
And in your mind, that's different from a secretary? We would also have a secretary at some point, or?
I guess what I'm thinking is we wouldn't need a secretary, but to me, secretary implies more formal responsibilities than a scribe. But I would certainly, if everybody felt like we should have a secretary, that's fine with me too. So what are your thoughts?
Well, this is a committee, and we are not a policy making, but policy proposing group. And so in that sense, in my mind, it's a work committee. And so the scribe simply keeps accurate detail of what it is we discussed and the order of events, and make sure that it's published appropriately and move on. I am intrigued though by Tom's suggestion that we have an editor, and I'm thinking about that, and that may be enough to cover both areas quite well.
So are you saying, Michael, that you'd be interested in doing both areas?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, I mean,
separate positions.
I certainly
Okay.
can, but I think we can talk about that as we go on. Okay, I don't. This is a little early to be committing to, those kinds of weeds.
Okay.
I think
So why don't we just
small-
deal with the scribe and
Yeah.
sounds like Michael's our scribe.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we just plan to revisit it then
Mhm.
at a future meeting, and hopefully at that point we will have a sixth member. So we can talk about it then. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah, I'm comfortable doing minutes, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I will put them all together and send them to each of you privately for any corrections or input or whatever, and you can get an idea of what they look like. And if you're comfortable with that, then we'll just move forward in that world.
And then publish them.
Yeah.
On a web page or something.
Yeah.
So the next agenda item is the review of the existing bylaws.
Did you skip over the conflicts of interest declaration? Or
No, we did that earlier. We
Okay.
did. I thought everybody said they didn't have any conflicts of interest.
I guess that's one of the things we need to record.
I did.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
What everybody
I
said.
think, well, let me just go back to it.
Bill, I think you were muted when she did it. I saw you were muted.
Yeah, I think I missed it.
Okay, sorry. So
So then,
we'll
can
just
you confirm
repeat.
that?
So do you mean
so we'll repeat conflicts of interest. Does anyone
conflicts
have a
of
conflict of interest?
on any of the agenda items today? Is that the idea,
Correct.
or with the NCAC in general, or?
I think it's just with the bylaws committee and the agenda items today, is my understanding of how the NCAC handles conflict of interest. They talk about agenda items for the day.
Okay.
Does that sound fair to
Okay.
everybody? Jeff, you might
Yep.
weigh in if you think that should be different. As someone
So
who
I'll,
only,
I'll point out that the conflict of interest is defined in the bylaws. So this is really kind of your wheelhouse to kind of decide whether it's doing the right thing now. And I think what it does right now is it says the office, because there's nothing in the bylaws about how this committee needs to operate. So the officers have to declare whether they have conflicts of interest with the stuff on
agenda
the current agenda.
items.
So
Correct.
you may not need to do conflicts of interest at all, and you can decide that because you're or pending approval from the general membership. But really, this kind of stuff is in your hands. You are, because you're most likely what you recommend is going to get adopted. So
thank you. Personally, I feel like it doesn't hurt to do conflicts of interest. I feel like to be transparent, which I think should be one of our main purposes, is it's not going to hurt to make sure that if anyone has a conflict of interest about any agenda item, which is what the bylaws say, that they state them. And that doesn't mean you can't participate, but at least it's known. So I have none. Anyone else would like to comment? I think everybody.
I have none.
I have none.
I have none.
Okay, I think I heard Tom and Bill simultaneously say I have none. So is that correct? All right. So
That's correct.
okay.
And then Nancy, could I ask one other sort of introductory question? Because I don't see it on the agenda. There was a blizzard of emails about this public interest law. And what I either didn't understand, didn't see, couldn't understand was this part about emails among us. And somebody said that they would send out emails to us privately. And I assume that was so that they wouldn't have to be controlled by the public meeting law. But I'm just not sure I have a very good grasp on what I am supposed to do or not supposed to do to be sure the committee's in compliance.
So my understanding from having read the law, which I did because of this, and I have never had to work under public meeting laws before. So, my work has been on private organizations that are not under that, and anyone else can correct me if I'm wrong, but only two of us can talk at any one time. We can't have three of us talking outside a public meeting or via email or with notes. We can only talk basically one-on-one, and that's legitimate. So I think what Michael said, where he would send out meeting notes individually to us all for input and feedback, I think would be legitimate. And then as long as they ultimately went on a website or got communicated out publicly, that we would be okay. Would anyone like to weigh in on that interpretation?
That's my understanding of having read it. That's my understanding.
That's what I do with the officers. I reach out to each other officer separately.
Yeah.
But
and for instance,
if we don't care about whether or not everybody sees what we're sending, is there a way to just send an email to everybody and be in compliance?
I think
No,
that's
we can't do-
problematic.
no, we can't do that. We can't do the reply all to, if somebody, for instance, would email us as a group, we could not do a reply all.
But even if it's posted on the website or
Now that's something different that Jeff can probably
Yeah, that might be a topic for later. For if there are special situations where you really want to all work on stuff, but not in a meeting like this, I have some ideas which we can save for later. I was going to say there's a trick that I often use where I want to send an email to everybody that's not a reply all, but I don't want to create an email thread, which would be in violation. I BCC everybody, and then they can all reply to me individually, and so that's something you can do where it saves some time, but it does not it doesn't really create a group email that constitutes a meeting. So
Wow, that's
So
incredibly
before-
awkward.
So in terms of setting up this meeting
Yeah.
and some of the discussions where we were doing that, we did not know that we were subject to Oregon Public Meeting Law. And so
Yeah.
we're starting clean now with this first
Mhm.
meeting.
Yeah.
Going forward, we will.
Yeah, that was that was
we will
my
not be
assumption.
doing that. And so, so I think a lot of the key things on this agenda are to try to avoid having to go back. So like setting future meeting dates, for example, toward the end of the meeting, we will be doing so that we don't have to go through a very painful way of handling Oregon Public Meeting Law. So, and I did go back. Thank you, Jeff, for sending out the link to the discussion at the previous meeting with Sarah Absher, where she really encouraged us strongly to err on the side of transparency and wherever possible, which I think we all wanted to do. I mean, we all stated that as we were being nominated, and it's going to be important going forward to be open and transparent. So I don't know, did that answer your question, Bill?
I think so. I
Okay.
think the answer is we can't operate efficiently, kind of in a
Well,
nutshell.
it certainly,
Yep.
it certainly
Yep.
does. I'm optimistic. It's taken me a while to come around to this. I'm optimistic that we are going to learn to be able to be transparent and efficient, that it will definitely have an impact on us. So, okay. So any other questions on the agenda? I should have asked that, I guess, at the beginning, but any other changes or additions to the agenda you'd like to talk about? Because let me just go over it very quickly. After this discussion, we would be reviewing the current bylaws, hopefully pretty quickly, because hopefully we've all read them. Going into a discussion about the process of how we're going to accomplish this. Brainstorm for bylaws revisions, which a brainstorm, when we get to that, is strictly just free flow ideas. Michael will be recording quickly. We won't be discussing them. We will just be brainstorming and then later discussing. Set regular future meeting dates, have an opportunity for public comment for anyone who would like to, and then summarize the meeting for a report to the NCAC meeting and set action items. So, and then adjourn. Any other comments? Okay, so who would like to discuss the current bylaws?
I'll take a stab at it for the time being.
Okay, all right. And
Um,
has anyone besides Susan been on the bylaws committee in the past? Okay, thank you.
I've noted some inconsistencies in there and some confusing aspects to it, which I think kind of lend themselves to a short email. For instance, the powers of appointment of the president versus the necessity that they be elected to committees, which seems to be an inconsistency. Just basic numbering as a reference point would seem to be an addition that would be advantageous for all of us. And I guess the process is a little confusing to me because the bylaws themselves call only for proposed changes from the chair as well as individual members. And so as a committee, we are not included as a group that should be suggesting, at least ab initio, proposed bylaws changes. So I think there's some interesting conflicts in there that really beg to be at least changed, but I'm not sure that as a committee we are entitled to do that.
Well, we
I
all
noted
are.
that as well, actually, and I think we're members of the NCAC, and it does allow the members to come up with things. So I think we are, but I noted that as
Yeah.
well.
I'd say there's two categories of changes. One is basically kind of an editorial thing. There are some things that are not clear, not consistent, and frankly not well formatted. But we also may want to have some substantive changes. And but whatever we do, we should probably try to minimize the number of times we change the bylaws. We've already changed it twice this year. people are going to become less patient with us in terms of the process, the county. Bylaws are more like a constitution as opposed to just a memo or personal correspondence. So they shouldn't be
Right.
changed very often.
So Tom, you said they've been changed twice. The ones that I downloaded were from 2018. Do you know where a current
Well, the
version would
ones-
be?
Well, what I downloaded was, it says, as amended and adopted April 8th, 2023 and May 13th, 2023.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Yeah, I have the same one.
Okay. Well, I'm glad. Thank you. I will get the new ones.
Could Tom, could you circulate those to,
I can,
I guess
Probably
me,
on the site,
me
right?
personally, and perhaps one of,
I will post a link here just a second in the
Okay.
chat.
Thank you, Jeff.
oh, I like them, yeah. Those are the committee members?
When I,
Okay, well, that's helpful. Michael?
yeah, when I looked them over a few times and recognized it as a document becoming. Is that fair? And you know, and it's not easy. It's really not
No.
easy to do this because you know, it's incumbent upon us to understand, you know, the concerns, the personality of the organization, the people who are involved, representing all of those people, and so on and so forth. And really, the bylaws ought to service all of that. I also recognize some potential inconsistencies or even contradictions in the bylaws. And I think what we can do is be creative and certainly clearer in what is needed there and so on. That's why I was kind of drawn to Tom's suggestion that we could really use an editor or somebody who's a good wordsmith academically, I'm a semanticist, and please don't ask me to do that. I don't want that's, but I understand words mean something, and how they go together means something, and so we need to be not only careful but clear and simple in what it is. So you know, it's really who we are and how we function and what's expected of us and where we're going to go and so on and so on. All of those sorts of things need to be there and need to be pretty clear. So it's going to take some time, and I'm not sure that we want to be proposing some changes a lot, but we maybe take a section at a time, for example, and work that one out and move that forward, and then take another section as long as it is consistent with the one that's already passed, and then move that forward and so on. Rather than the entire document, but be simple so that, you know, if we've got 100 members of this organization, we have to assume that their understanding of these sort of quasi-legal issues are simple enough to understand and not confusing to anybody. That's kind of my initial read on it.
Okay, thank you. These are all great comments, and I have to say I'm kind of embarrassed. I had an older version here, so looks like there's some significant changes that have happened in the last couple of years. So I think we can. These are all really good comments. I agree. I have quite a few comments myself on how I think the bylaws can be made more clear and consistent and encompass more of more information. And I'd also like to propose that we consider adding standing rules. Standing rules are something that a lot of organizations keep that are easier to change. They're not as important as a bylaw.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're easier to change and can provide a little more information to the officers and membership. And have their own change process in them. So that might be another thing to consider in the brainstorming session. So could we go ahead and move on to process
Can
or
I just,
how we're going to do this? Oh, what?
Could I make one comment about the bylaws, or question
You bet.
anyway? So I'm a bit surprised that the bylaws would be such a contentious issue and have
Yeah.
so much interest. So I was wondering if maybe Susan, I guess you were on the committee, or Jeff, could you provide some context and why this is sort of so urgent today?
I could give one example, and it's something, an area for sure that I think can be improved in the bylaws around voting. At the most recent election, it was asked who was eligible to vote. And the chair of the CAC said only 2 maximum per household, which Sarah Absher then at the election itself said was misinformation. And in fact, people can vote who are in family trusts, who are in LLCs. There's no limit. And so that needs to be fleshed out, because people were disenfranchised during the election and didn't know it until the day of election itself. So that's one area that I think is really critical. And that's why it became such one of the things that was a very hot button when people found out that they could have voted, but were told they couldn't. Trying to think. Another thing that is of concern is in the bylaws, it says that you have to, advertise or put a sign in 3 prominent areas, but those 3 prominent areas are not defined, which if someone is walking through the village, they don't necessarily know where to look. Is it going to be on a utility pole? Is it going to be at the public? Is it going to be at the marketplace? Is it going to be at the new bulletin board at the golf course? So I think for the community's sake, I think it would benefit to define what those 3 prominent areas are. Just kind of a couple of examples. Another thing that I heard, which I think, I agree with this. It says that quorum, there have to be at least 8 general members present to take action and vote. But there are certain subjects that really impact. There are 908 residences according to the county tax rolls. We currently only have about 100 members that are actively involved at any given time in the NCAC. Historically, when my parents were involved, and then Bill and my family are on the same street, our history goes back to the 60s. The NCAC was under the umbrella of the NCA, which is more of the social aspect. And so because they were united and there used to be the annual meeting at the firehouse, you got much more information. In the treasurer's part of the bylaws, you'll see there are references to annual budget preparation, financial reports. There were printed copies that were mailed to all Nesquinites in the 70s. I actually ran across them because my parents saved everything. And so there was a lot of information that was passed on through the NCA/NCAC meetings at the firehouse annually that people just aren't getting. And in fact, I don't even think in all the NCAC meetings that I've dialed into, I've never seen a budget. I've never seen a financial report or an annual budget like we used to have in the 70s. So let's see what else. I'm just trying to think. So things have been kind of separated, and I actually don't know why it was separated out from the NCA, which is the Nesquin Community Association. What else? I'm trying to think. Another thing I noticed is the Nesquin Community Association just revised their bylaws this past year. And they redefined what the actual district definition is for Nesquin. And now our district definition does not agree with what the NCA definition is. And I believe they should be the same because we're talking about the same community. Just a couple, anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but those are some of the things I personally have observed. And from a historical standpoint, things have changed.
Jeff, would you like? Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Jeff, would you like to weigh in on the Bill's
Yes,
question?
so I'm going to restate your question, Bill, which is to make sure I got it right, which is, why is there so much attention and kind of heat around the bylaws now? Like, why do so many people care? Is that roughly what you were asking?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it would be sort of a sleepy committee with
It
little or no
isn't.
outside interest
Oh.
except for the people that, sort of want to poke around in legal documents and
And
unless
I
there's
think the
some.
answer is it historically was a sleepy committee. In fact, under the previous officers, the bylaws committee was not properly constituted according to the bylaws the way we just did it.
The most recent one, that's correct.
Yeah.
Not the one I was on.
Okay.
Just so people know.
Yes. Yeah. And no one really said boo, but as you may or may not know, depending on how involved you've been in the NCAC, things have been very, very hot and contentious in general in the last year, and that has just spilled over. It spills over everywhere. Like everything that comes up is now seen as a potential vector for conflict, and so that's why people are asking, like, about do the nominees for the bylaws committee own STRs, which I think most people think is irrelevant, but I think if you well, all of you seem very excited about making these bylaws better, so maybe you'll be very visible and impress people with your impartiality and your commitment to making the NCAC work better. But so hopefully that dies down and you are just seen as like doing some much needed cleanup on the underlying plumbing of how we get things done. So
Yeah, thank
And then,
you. Who's
Jeff,
talking?
Let me
Oh, Bill.
step out just a little bit more. I see it more, Tom or Jeff, more than cleanup, because what I'm picking up now, and I don't disagree at all, is that a lot of these issues that the NCAC may be discussing and dealing with in public may be contentious, probably are contentious, and that is something I think we have to take into account. And to be prepared for that, and to be as careful and as open and as communicative as possible. I started with the same perspective that Bill has, and that is why is a bylaws committee one of the few standing committees of an organization? I've never really quite seen that before, and now I understand, because apparently this committee is going to be developing not only the structure, but how things operate within the community of Nescoin. And that's a potential hot potato. I can see that. So in terms of Susan's comment about membership and communication and who knows what, and how do we get it to them, and what telephone pole we tack it to, and so on and so forth. Perhaps what we might want to consider also is the development of a listserv of all possible members, and to have that reviewed once a year by the membership, and make sure that that things are distributed in a formal and recognizable way, a way that is expected by everybody. In times past that would have been snail mail. Today, perhaps it's as simple as email, but there are ways to deal with that, and the more open we are, the more confidence the membership is going to have in what we're doing.
Yeah,
We're not reaching 800 homeowners currently. We're only reaching 100 of the 908 homeowners.
But a homeowner is how many people? One person?
One homeowner could be two people. It could be a family trust. It could be an LLC with multiple fractional.
But you mentioned,
and it's not necessarily a homeowner. It also incorporates businesses and also lots.
Correct.
And built
Correct.
property.
Tax lot owners.
And workers.
And workers, that's right. So I hear you. I think all of these comments are great, and I've noted them in our area for brainstorming as well. But I'd kind of like to get back to process if we could, or we're just not gonna. We only have 45 minutes left on the agenda, and I'm going to try to be on time. So is that okay if we move on to process?
Mhm.
Okay, because I agree. I just want to quickly add for Bill that because of some of the contention that's happened, I think there's been a feeling among some of the members that there's been a lack of transparency, and that people have been selected for committees, for example, that may have certain biases, and others haven't been open for selection. And I certainly commend the current officers for erring on the side of being really open and allowing for everybody to apply and that kind of thing. So moving on to process, we have quite a job, and I hear you, I think it was Tom, I'm not sure, my
Yeah.
people are all going around, had said we need to kind of keep the numbers of changes short, because the bylaws are like the
Let me give you a little
Constitution.
background.
But on the other hand, I do want to say we did all kind of agree in the election meeting that we've got 6 greatly qualified members, qualified people, and we could do a quick change to allow for up to 6 people on the bylaws committee, to have between 3 and 6. And I'd hate to wait and not have Susan's valuable input. So if we could have something like that, where we have one initial kind of a short-term thing that we could go through the county attorney. I think the officers have already said they support that as well, and get that through, and then have more of a lengthy discussion on the other changes. Does that sound like that would be okay, or do any of you object to separating that one out?
The only problem I have with it is that we don't want to create fatigue on the part of the county. And absolutely, I agree in that we should expand it to the people who are interested, and I have no problem with that. My only concern is I just don't want to go back to the well too often.
I agree.
I'll just pop in here. I support, like, I think your first order of business is to establish a working relationship with William Sargent. Because I think the fatigue concern is real, but if we're not even talking with the county attorney, like we don't know, like we're speculating about what that throughput is. But I suggest that once you have that working relationship established, probably having a schedule of revisions where like he knows months ahead of time that you're going to be coming to, like, that you're planning to deliver a group of revisions at a particular time, and that you're hoping he can turn it around, will probably be helpful. But I think doing that first round of small revisions, so that you meet him, you can talk to him, you establish how you work with Sarah to get through him, just to get that plumbing in place, is really important.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Good point. Good point.
Is there any concern, Nancy, about having an even number of people on the committee? Frequently boards have an odd number, so that if there's you don't end up with a tie vote or something. What is
so
the
that
current
was
window?
that was actually raised at the election meeting, and I think I, as chair, wouldn't vote unless it came to a tie. Well, sorry, that would leave 5 if I didn't vote. A lot of the times we're probably going to be more of a consensus kind of a situation, like, are there any objections kind of a thing. I'm hoping we won't have to do that many actual formal votes, but if there are, I just would not vote as chair.
What do the current bylaws say? What is the
They don't
bracket
say.
for how
They
many?
don't.
They just say between 3 and 5. I think nobody ever envisioned that you have more than 5 people interested. They probably thought,
Oftentimes they
it'd be
found
tough to
difficulty
get
finding
3.
people to serve on it.
Right. So I think this is kind of an indicative of what was happening the past year. But Michael?
Yeah, 2 comments. The issue of raising, well, personally, I like the idea of an even number. because I operate from a consensus perspective as a parliamentarian. And if we don't have consensus, then maybe we shouldn't be passing something. That's kind of a personal thing on my part. So I don't have any problem with an even number at all. Secondly, when I was a parliamentarian for the AFL-CIO, and let me tell you, that's a job. That's a job. And I mean, you know, when people start standing up and waving their fist at you because you know, the parliamentary decision didn't go in their favor, then you know, all I could do is grin from ear to ear. But the same issue came. Wait a minute, we've got one extra person to put on this committee, but we can't do it because there's not enough chairs. Let's change the bylaws. Okay, how many in favor of changing the bylaws? Raise your. I said, wait a minute. You can't do that. You can't just change bylaws to make that happen. And so we went on and on. So in order to step aside from the notion that we're just changing the size of the committee to approve whatever happens at any given time, I would consider that the bylaw committee, this is just a consideration, that have at least 3 members and not put a cap on it. There may be a reason why we may want 7 or 8 or 9 people for some future organizational behavior. I'm not real hard on that, but it's just a suggestion. And so that's kind of how I see it. I really want to hear what Susan has to say from time to time, because that's valuable. That's a you know, that's a history that we need to have, and I would certainly like to increase the opportunity of having more people pipe in and vote and so on. And that's kind of where I'm at on all of that.
Okay, any other comments? Wyatt?
Yeah, for those who really have a background in the history of the contentious aspect of the committees, are we in a situation where we're going to feel like we have to submit piecemeal changes so that we don't end up with a document that's submitted as a whole to the electorate for their approval down the road to have it defeated over some small item?
I
My
can
hope.
speak to that.
Okay, Tom.
I've got a fair amount of experience. I was part of the what became the Wi-Fi standard, and basically started that from the beginning. So you can blame me for Wi-Fi, by the way, if you like. But we would typically have 300 engineers in a room from, say, 200 different companies arguing over fine points of a draft, which is about 1,200 pages. The possibility or the way that the drafts are organized and the way comments are summarized and recorded, it was critical to being able to make any progress. It took a while for that committee to figure out how to do it. It actually took 10 years to get the first draft out. But we obviously don't want to do that. But we also only have a document which is only 7 pages long, which is great. I mean, that's tiny. I think we can process them. We can process this document in an orderly fashion, recording all comments on all sections, plus any new sections people want to add. And I think that's a very doable thing. So I think we can create a package which is separable. We can, if there are points of contention, we can have separate votes on different sections. So I don't think it's, I think it's very doable. In terms of a process. Now, in terms of everybody agreeing to that, that's a different problem. But I think we can at least present everything such that decisions can be made.
So I would agree with you, Tom. I would hope that we could actually have no more than 2, say, additional bylaws, sets of changes, and hopefully only 1 after this initial one. But there, you know, I'm also hoping that we can do some parliamentary procedure training for the members of when we do present bylaws and other kinds of things, that people understand how to do just basic amendments, because they can do you know, there, it's possible if someone has an objection to a certain part of the bylaws that they could raise an amendment. And that could all be done as part of the overall project. So, but we need to do some training on that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you know,
and
something for us
that-
to talk to the officers about providing maybe a special session that has maybe 45 minutes of parliamentary procedure training.
It's not so much parliamentary procedure, is that everything that's submitted must be in writing in some form. That way you have a record of what is being proposed, specifically what's being proposed. So, and just an explanation of what the mechanics of changing it is really what's needed rather than parliamentary. Parliamentary is how you raise your hand or you don't raise your hand, but the mechanics of how you get the information into a way that we can process it and produce a product.
Right. I think it's both. I was talking more about the concern of getting it approved once we have a draft and that kind of thing. I agree with you that I think it should be able to happen. I guess if I could just put through an idea I had for a process, and then people can tear it apart. Does that sound okay?
Well, did we finish the
the one bylaws change?
Yes.
So what do people think
some,
about leaving it, about Michael's amendment, basically to leave it open-ended on the maximum number of people?
I would not be in favor of that at all. I think above 7, you start to run into just chaos, and a committee is much more able to address issues if it's smaller. I would change it instead of 3 to 6, 3 to 7. That's a bracket. We only need to add 1, but then there is already the ability to add another if it becomes, if the consensus thing is not working or whatever, we decide. I'm persuaded by the consensus idea, but at least that would leave us some flexibility if we wanted to add 1 more later.
Okay, so Bill's making an amendment to the amendment by changing the upper limit to 7. Any comments on Bill's amendment to the amendment?
I'd support that. Michael's got small group communication background, so he's heard the 7 plus or minus 2 as being a magic number for committees. I personally believe it's 5 plus or minus 2. And having worked in a lot of contentious committees, and I don't think this is one of them, that's a magic number. Between 3 and 5 and 7 is the right number.
I agree with that.
Okay, so am I hearing Michael, are we hearing a consensus then that we
Looks like it.
approve the amendment to the amendment?
Yeah, does anybody object to that? Is there any objections? Then there you go,
Okay.
Nancy.
All right, so could we actually get a motion then to change the bylaws to have the number of committee members be between 3 and 7?
I would recommend, I move that we recommend to the board for vote by the general membership, a change in the bylaws to the number of persons on the committee for bylaws of not less than 3 nor more than 7.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Who seconded that? Tom?
Tom.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to change the committee, to recommend to the membership, change the number of committee members from 3 to 5 to between 3 and 7. No less than 3 and no more than 7.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you. And thank you, Bill, for bringing us back to that. So now
I'll be
for
back
process.
in 30 seconds. Continue.
Okay. Do we all need a break? Should we just take a 1-minute break? We've been going now for an hour, so. Okay, why don't we take a quickie break? Motion or meeting adjourned for 1 minute.
Time for more coffee.
Yeah,
Right.
Nancy, I'm not looking forward to the process discussion because you now have a change that must go through the process.
Right.
So
Well, we're
that's
sort
the
of,
hard part. Yeah.
right. So, and by process, I guess I'm thinking about a little broader way of how the committee is operating. So,
Okay. Well,
Um,
also
in
the
terms-
mechanics of what happens now, what order, when do you go to this county first? Do you go to the officers first? Because all that's really mushy in the bylaws,
Mhm.
Right.
which
right.
is something you could
So
also work like that could
And-
also be on the list. So
under the current bylaws that I just discovered, the bylaws
it's the very
revision.
last section.
Yes, I'm in it. The change to the existing bylaws can be, will review and report back to the membership at the next general membership meeting on any proposed bylaws changes with a recommendation. So we would like to have that on the
Read the next
agenda for the
paragraph,
next
then.
meeting. And then after review and approval by the Tillamook County Council, any changes shall be voted on at the next meeting. So we're going to have to abide by that, I guess.
Well, I don't
and
even know how to
written-
interpret those two paragraphs in terms of what
Yeah.
order things happen in.
Well, I think first, it sounds like for the September meeting, we have to report back. It's not saying that we have to get a vote. It just says we have to report back,
Mhm.
correct?
Okay.
Mhm.
So in the meantime, maybe simultaneously we could, well, if we could get a quick approval from the Tillamook County Council, and we would have this meeting with notes of this meeting up on the site that we're making this recommendation. We discussed it at the last meeting. If we could get a response back from the county council 10 days prior to our September meeting, which would be a very quick turnaround, maybe it could actually be voted on at the September meeting.
The next
Well, the
general meeting
next
is
one's in
October.
Oh, okay. Well, then we've
So
got
Every
you've
other
got
month.
6 weeks.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay, thanks. So we would have some time then, because we
Well,
could
6
send
weeks
out.
will go fast. Like you want to start the process with Sarah.
Especially with Labor Day.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think this was something that we talked about at the last meeting, and I think the officers were certainly in favor, and so
Yeah, I don't think
hopefully
this is controversial. It's just sort of
it's
we
not.
have to kind of get a
Right.
bunch of things to happen in the right order so that we're ready to have a vote on
Right.
October 14th or whatever it is.
And it kind of makes sense that we could go ahead and start, discussing things with Sarah. And as you said, Jeff, start a dialogue and a relationship with the county attorney.
But I've been finding a secretary that like when you have long lead times where you have to notice things,
Right.
time really gets like things catch up on you really fast. So
Right.
don't
I
get
bet.
too complacent just because it's 6 weeks away. Yeah.
Very good point. Thank you. I also thank you for going ahead and sending out the meeting notice as a separate email, and so we could get started, because I think we have a lot to cover. Okay, do we have everybody back? I think Bill is not. Oh yeah,
I've
Bill's
returned.
back. I think everybody's back. Call the meeting to order again. So in terms of a process, I kind of was envisioning different things with this process discussion, and I think our purpose, as we've been talking about, we'd like to keep in mind that we want to emphasize transparency, input by members, and trust building, along with appropriate laws and rules, and hopefully being able to act efficiently under the Oregon Public Meeting Law. I'd like to suggest that we brainstorm ideas for changes. Some of them have already come out and are being recorded, and then I'm sure people have others, including some that were submitted by Alexis Tate in previous meetings, and there may be others that people have submitted. And there'll be an opportunity at public comment at the end of the meeting for those who would like to add some brainstorming ideas and comments on today's meeting. Consider input from officers and members. I'm suggesting we put a form on the website for submitting suggestions, and actually create a web page for the bylaws committee on the website that would include having a form for submitting suggestions, having all of our notes on there, having ideas as we're recommending changes on there so that people will have a chance to comment, and including setting up an email address similar to what the officers have for the CAC in general, where people could submit comments and ideas in a email to, and we have one of our committee members designated to check that email daily. I've been impressed. I've had to use the CAC officers email a couple of times with comments, and the response has been quick. I've been really impressed at how quickly they've gotten back to me, and that was the previous year's officers. So that to really be able to set up some lines of communication. I'd like to consider for the bylaws some recommendations from Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. So the bylaws talk about using Robert's Rules of Order when appropriate. It's not just parliamentary procedures. It has a section on bylaws, and it has a section on standing rules that defines what most organizations should have. And I think in the future meeting, we could possibly go through what some of those simplified areas are that might make things more clear in the bylaws and a way to structure them. These are just my thoughts. We can go with them or not. I think we should organize into categories for later discussion, and that could be something we could do in the next meeting or a future meeting. After we get the brainstorm out of the way, we could do some work offline to individually, whatever, to categorize these different changes so that we can attack them in an organized way of what do we want to do with some of these recommendations. And then develop a plan, recommend the urgent, non-controversial items quickly, which would be like adding the 2 additional possible positions to the committee, and then develop a plan for comprehensive changes. Are there going to be some that are non-controversial that we could do maybe as an interim bylaws committee change, or are we going to want to go all the way and have a finalized set and just have one package for people to go through? Well, I think we'll get that answer as we discuss bylaws as it goes along. We'll have an idea if we want to just have one packet going forward, or if we're going to need more. New ideas or further thoughts can be communicated to I have the bylaws committee chair, but just in terms of, because we have this one-on-one rule, if you could communicate, I guess, things to me, then I will communicate out individually to you between meetings if there's something that can't wait till a meeting. But I think I will err on the side of putting things on the website so that people know what we're thinking. I just don't think that's going to hurt. As we go forward, as we build trust, hopefully people won't feel the need to go read all of this, but if they are, great. And if they want to comment through the communication channels we establish, they can do that. It'll just be enriching. If we need to, we could set up subcommittees of 2 members, no more than 2 members, to research and report recommendations on some items, bring back to meetings. Because we are allowed to talk one-on-one, we can have a subcommittee of 2, is my understanding. Sarah Absher has indicated that she would like to be involved with us, which is terrific. I have the highest regard for Sarah. The Tillamook County is lucky to have her. And so hopefully she will join us, like she mentioned, in some of our meetings, or give us some informal periodic input. I had asked at the last CAC meeting to have a report on progress for each of the NCAC meetings agendas going forward. And I think the officers sounded receptive to that. Jeff said he'll do that. So we can have a report that's posted ahead of time, agreed upon by the committee members, and we report. And then we need to look at the existing bylaws process for approval of changes, as some of us noted it's confusing. Jeff just mentioned it,
Mhm.
and see if we can simplify and make clear what that process is. But we're going to have to live with it currently. So maybe when we have a recommendation, well, I don't know. I think we're going to have to just live with it for now and tackle that as one of our changes. I doubt that we can come up with a new process in time to have that as part of our simple procedure going forward, but I could be wrong. So that was just my thinking. Do you, does anyone have any comments on that? Additions, changes? What would you like to see in terms of a process?
I'd like to see,
Tom.
yeah, basically, I agree with everything you said. The thing which concerns me a little bit is requesting for comments without giving a structure or a way that people can consistently communicate to us. I think it's important that we be able to log all inputs. We have to do that for transparency.
Mhm.
And also comments on comments, we have to be able to keep those straight. So that really entails some amount of formality in terms of how we process it. We just can't say, what do you want changed?
I agree.
Because we're liable to get pretty vague. And
I
Mhm.
think by having a form, the key will be coming up with that form that would allow exactly that kind of structure, Tom. I agree with you. And then you brought up an interesting point of how would people comment on the comments. So
yeah.
yeah, that's a good point. Maybe we need a subcommittee to come up with that.
Well, I'd be happy to propose some process, some mechanism for gathering that. I'd be happy to have somebody help me.
Okay. Does
looking
that
at
sound like a
Michael.
good thing for people to have a process and come back to our next meeting to talk about how we do that? Is there anyone who would like to join Tom on that?
I'll join Tom, just to keep notes and so on. How's that?
Excellent.
Okay.
And-
So any objection to my appointing Tom and Michael to come up with a process for gathering input and allowing people to provide comment?
And maybe loop me in on that. Sorry, I interrupted while you were.
I don't
asking
think you
suggestions.
can you,
No,
Jeff?
yeah, he's not a member.
So I was gonna.
Can you?
So I was going to ask that you loop me in on that effort because it's going to be very, very intimately involved with the secretary. But I should have waited to ask that until you were done asking for objections. So apologies.
Okay. So anyway, are there any objections to Tom and Michael working on an input gathering methodology and process? Okay. You are it. And in terms of working with you, Jeff, I guess Tom could just go ahead and talk to you about it, correct? And
Yeah,
get input from you.
Tom lives across the street from me, and we talk. So,
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments on the process or additions or changes you'd like to do for how we go forward? Bill?
You mentioned the rapidity with which the officers got back to you when you asked questions or when other people did or whatever. And maybe this would be part of what Tom and Michael are going to do, but when somebody asks a question, I'm not sure how we quickly get back if 6 people have to chime in or say this is the answer. Does the chair just say this is the answer and hope everybody agrees that that's the answer, or how does that process work?
No, I don't think the chair has any business making decisions for the committee and responding. I think this is something where I would just suggest it's part of the process that Tom and Michael will come up with. But what I would do is note it and perhaps suggest that they fill out the form, but also note it for the agenda and set it out as part of the agenda of public input. But no, I have no intention of trying to speak for the committee on anything that we have not decided as a committee.
So Bill, could I ask a little clarification on your concern? What kind of questions would we be thinking about for that?
Oh, Nancy just mentioned that when she asked a question of the officer, she got a quick response. So maybe some committee member says, have you thought about changing this section of the bylaws? Question mark. And Nancy could write back and say, no, we haven't. Or Nancy would have to send something to everybody and say, I propose responding to saying, no, we haven't. Or everybody would
I can't
chime
send
in.
things to everybody.
I don't know how, I don't know how,
cannot. I can't send,
I don't know how
under
that would
Oregon
work.
public meeting law, I cannot send things out to people.
Yeah,
So,
so I
so
think
I may have to retract actually the email thing. But I mean, it might be that I'm going to put that in Tom and Michael's bailiwick to come up with that on input for the process. I
I'm
think
not sure
it
how
just
much-
more appropriately
Yeah.
should a little more thought should be given to that. And in my case, I had asked about membership because I'm representing a family trust, and that's not one of the criteria that was in the bylaws at the time. And I have to look to see if that was one of the changes made because of
It
my
wasn't, it was
Okay.
not, but should be.
request. So
Yeah,
they
It's one of the
quickly actually,
disenfranchised.
yeah. So
I
it
think,
quickly went to the county attorney who said, "Oh no, that's included." So, but it came up when we had the registration and it said, "Are you a member?" And it listed very restricted categories. And well, no, I can't say I'm a property owner. I represent the family who is the property owner, so the trust. So anyway, I sent that
So
out.
I'd like to comment on the concern there. If there's a question of, should this be changed? That's a simple response. Go to the form. If there's a question about the content or in the intent of the bylaws, that's not our bailiwick. That is the officers, in my opinion. So we don't actually have that much public interaction. And I don't think there's any reason for us to have public interaction. We have input and we have visibility, but they're not part of our process.
I think all of us can certainly answer questions of fact. But any content or context or interpretation or whatever may be taken and saying, well, that's interesting, I will pass that on to the committee or something of that sort. Yeah, and make an honest decision there between those two. Answers fact and pass on others.
I think that sounds good. And I'll look forward to hearing your report at our next meeting.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, how often and when are we going to meet?
That's coming up after our bylaws, or excuse me, our brainstorm. But I'm kind of thinking of deferring because the agenda only goes till 11:30. So we may want to just hold off on our brainstorm for the next meeting and just go into setting future meeting dates and public comment. What do you think?
I think we've kind of been brainstorming now, just in general terms.
I've got a whole lot of others.
Fair enough. And perhaps we should solicit those to go on the next agenda. Items that might need discussion. And an hour and a half might not be enough.
I think that's probably true.
Well, an hour and a half should be enough. We should make that enough.
Well, okay, that's a good point. You will fill the maximum time plus.
I mean,
we'll fill whatever time we set.
Yeah,
I promise you. If we set 3 hours, we'll spend 3 hours.
That's right. I am
exactly. So
comfortable jumping into substance at this point. I think we have some more brainstorming business to do first.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Because I have a ton. Actually, not a ton. I won't scare you, but I have a lot. One of which is what I just mentioned on who's a member. And I think some of what Susan had mentioned as issues I had on my list as well. And so and with others of you. So meeting dates. So any objection to skipping to postponing the brainstorming for the next meeting?
None.
Done.
Okay. So I would like to suggest, because we have so much on our plate, that we set up meetings twice a month. Is that what would that be okay? At least initially, setting up
Yeah.
regular meetings twice a month. Any objection to that? Would you like to have more meetings, fewer meetings, and make them 2 hours maybe instead of an hour and a half?
I think twice a month is a good idea.
Okay. Any objections? Any
I
objections
would
to
tend to
2
think
hours?
2 hours twice a month?
Yes.
That sounds like a lot of
That's
meeting
right
to
up-
me, but maybe not. I guess that envisions people not doing homework in between, or
Well,
Yeah.
because we can't do a lot in between, in terms
That's
of,
the problem.
it kind of requires us to have these open public meetings. It's to be able to get any work done. We can't be just sending emails among one another like we might in a private organization, or if our committee had been deemed not subject to Oregon public meeting law, we could be doing a lot of it outside of meetings, but
One of the ways to deal with that is to judiciously appoint two people to do specific tasks in between.
Right.
Then that gets around the public meeting law because it's one-on-one, and allows some flexibility to say and do whatever we want, and then come back with recommendations to the committee.
right. And so that's why I appointed the one committee to look at the input. So you guys can hopefully come back with that process for input at the next meeting.
Maybe even have a beer.
But what I hope is that we could get a lot of the work done earlier in the year, because we're only a committee for a year. And then as there are going to be times where after we've submitted for comment and to the CAC, and then when we're waiting for the county attorney and Sarah's responses where we don't need to meet, right? It would just be, we would set up a schedule and hopefully we could get a lot of the work done early. But because of all these loops we have to hop through to get approvals, it's better for us to try to get most of the work done, I would hope, within the next 4 to 5 months. And then we have the rest of the year to get through the process and incorporate any changes people have. So, okay. So any objections to going with initially twice a month for 2 hours? Okay.
I would vote for an hour and a half, but I'm only one person.
Okay, so Bill is making an amendment for an hour and a half. What do you all think? Do you want to have a discussion on the amendment for an hour and a half?
Let's try it for a while.
Yeah, let's just try it, see how it works.
Okay, to try the hour and a half?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so I'm hearing general consensus on hour and a half meeting for twice a month. So now, what day of the week? Do you like Saturday mornings? We would need to avoid the CAC Saturday mornings, but, or would you prefer an evening during the week?
I kind of like the mornings.
Okay.
This works fine for me.
Are there people who cannot do it in the morning during the week?
All right. Would you prefer a weekday, Bill?
I would, just because the weekend's the only time I can see my grandkids. But
it's a big deal. Yeah.
you know,
so I am open to weekdays. I get the sense that most of us are retired, but Susan, you're still working, right? So is a weekday morning tough for you?
No, I have flexibility. So, I
Okay.
mean, I can, as long as I know in advance, I can work my schedule around it.
Okay. So, does anyone have a preference for what day of the week?
My preferences are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I work out at 10 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings.
Okay. Would anyone object to a Friday morning from 10 to 11:30?
could we start at 9?
That's fine.
Start what time, Bill, did you say?
Well, I was thinking 9. 9 to
Could
10:30
could I compromise with 9:30?
or 10 is fine. Yeah, 9:30 to 11.
Mm-hmm. That sound okay? Fridays, 9:30 to 11. So it would be, so we are currently the 1, 2, 3, 4th Saturday. Do you want to try to meet on the 2nd and 4th Friday mornings? Or if we did the 1st and 3rd Friday mornings, then we would have enough time to prepare a report for the NCAC meetings every other month on the 2nd Saturday morning.
I just want to
So-
flag that the first Friday of September is Labor Day weekend.
Good point.
Well, we wouldn't have to start then. We could start on the 15th. That
So
would
why
give
don't we
Tom
why
and
don't we-
Michael a little time to get their thing together.
why don't we go ahead and do the 2nd and 4th, and if we need to, we can hopefully we can have enough for a report for the October NCAC meeting.
Talk about
I
September.
would,
That's a Saturday.
so September 8th and September 22nd.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Does that sound okay? Do you think you guys could have an initial report recommendation for your process in 2 weeks?
Yep.
Okay, and then we can start on brainstorming. I think we could, if you don't have anything really firm on the process part, we could still spend the entire meeting on brainstorming. So for an agenda, I would like to suggest we look at getting the webpage set up. We look and maybe Jeff, maybe you and I could talk about getting a webpage at least initially set up.
Sure. Do you want to talk about that before the 8th or?
Yeah.
Okay.
At least
Actually,
the mechanism for it, because one of my big issues when we get to brainstorming is how we vote. And I think Zoom has provided so much. I think one reason we're having so much participation is because we do have people from all over that are coming into meetings via Zoom. But as we've seen in the meetings, I'm not talking about a bylaws committee, but for the bylaws for the general membership, we have these polls. And if somebody, if there's something comes up that's not in the poll, then everybody's flustered. We need to come up with a way to be able to vote. Anyway, but yes, I would like to perhaps at least have an initial discussion with you that we bring back to the meeting on the 8th on how we might be able to set up a web page and be able to incorporate the forms that Tom and Michael come up with and input mechanisms.
Yeah,
Does that sound okay?
I'd like to have a place to be able to put Michael and I work as we complete it, so people can look at it before the meeting.
Right.
So that would be really good if we could have a place to hang that.
Okay. Yeah, that would have been a good thing to talk with the whole group, but I can talk with smaller groups of you about that also. And if we need to make changes after, I mean, we probably were going to have to make changes anyway when we try things and see what works and what doesn't. So
Right. I think
we can cook something up to use for now and then fix it as needed. So
I think there's going to be a lot of that as we get started. But at least, are you the person that runs the web page, or do we have a different person that does that?
It's all me. I think I'm gonna, because you notice in the bylaws there's a position for a communications coordinator, and that stuff falls to the secretary. And I think I'm gonna in October invite people who want to be a communications coordinator, because I could use some help.
Yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
But
It's a lot. It's a lot of responsibilities. Those dual.
Yeah. It's kind of taken me by surprise how much work it is. But
Totally. Yeah.
And but for now it's all me, and unless we get really lucky, I will probably be more knowledgeable in IT matters than the person who becomes communication coordinator. So it'll still be mostly me.
Unless you
I think
recruit Biff Schlichting to do the website only.
Biff really doesn't want to do this anymore.
I know. I'm
He's really
joking,
busy,
but I'm serious at the same time because
Okay,
if you could twist his arm.
I'm going to interrupt because it's 11:31 and I want to keep on time. So at this point, do I hear any objections to our meeting every other, the second and fourth Fridays from 9:30 to 11 on a regular basis as needed? First meeting to start on September 8th. Okay, public comment. Jack or Tom, do you have?
Nancy
Oh,
is.
sorry, we haven't.
Well, no, I'm fine
Hearing
with the
no-
meeting. I just had a question on, so we're having, I guess, 6 people. It seems likely that from time to time, a person or two will have a conflict. Like I have a doctor's appointment on the 8th, but it's late enough. As long as the meeting ends on time, I'll be able to do it. But if it was already scheduled, it's a thing I couldn't move because it only takes
Right.
6 months to get a doctor's appointment. So
Yes.
I assume that's tolerable for the rest of the members.
So one of the things that we have is quorum for the bylaws committee is in here. Trying to remember what it is.
I don't
think it's
in the
3.
bylaws.
Should
I
be
think it's 3.
I think it's
50%
3.
plus one, yeah.
Yeah, so I think if anybody has a concern, please bring it up. But otherwise, I would hope that we could just go ahead and proceed. So if anybody does have something where they cannot attend a meeting, would you please let me know? Just email me and let me know or text me. My cell phone is on my emails. And actually, it would be nice to be able to get everybody's phone numbers if you wouldn't mind. And I don't think you need to do it publicly, but if you could email me with your phone number, that would be helpful.
I just looked and I do have a conflict also, Bill.
On the 8th?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I said, Nancy, is as long as it ends on time, I am okay with that.
Okay.
I mean, that time work.
Okay.
So we'd still have a quorum then, I guess.
Michael, you have a conflict where you absolutely can't make it?
Yeah, it's I told you about the piano. We have a piano group and we meet once a month, and that's Friday, that particular Friday morning, and I'm scheduled to play.
Okay, so every fourth Friday you would have a conflict?
No, those are in the future I can change those, but this one has already been set up, so that's not solid. It's just that particular one.
Okay, any other conflicts with Fridays? Okay, okay, you bring up a good question, Bill. Does anyone have a conflict with starting in a week? You probably wouldn't want to do that.
Well,
Labor Day
I guess that was my question. Anytime somebody has a conflict, are we going to try and readjust all the times
what do
and
y'all
everything?
think? I mean, I think it'd be nice if we could all be participating, but we'll be videoed, and so people could go in and watch the video if they wanted to. But what do you all think? How do we want to handle people who can't make meetings? Wyatt, you look like you were going to say something.
Well, I think that's a fairly easy proposition as long as we have a quorum. I think there's a process where we just make sure that we excuse the absence. But the other thing I'm concerned about, I guess, is that for Jeff's purposes, the ability to notice these meetings on the second and fourth Friday or the first and second Monday of each month makes it a lot easier on him from that standpoint in giving public notice concerning these meetings. So whatever we do, let's not make it ad hoc.
Yeah, that's true.
Ad hoc's bad.
very, very true.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Do
So
we
in
have to
terms
give
of-
2 weeks notice? Because September 8th is less than 14 days away.
So that is not really clear in OPML, and it's not really clear in the bylaws. So I say no. Like OPML just says like it has to be enough notice, and I think in the case of the bylaws committee, because there's probably not a huge interest among the membership of what your agenda items are, just a few days notice is probably okay. But my more concern is that both for the purposes of fatigue among the membership and the fact that we only get to send out 5 emails a month with our current plan. I don't want to send out lots of emails, so I want to bundle email notices together. So like we have a notice going out on Tuesday for the September 12th meeting, and I want to just like stick this notice at the bottom because I think like that, even though a lot of people may not scroll down that far, I think like I think it's okay. I think it meets the requirements because there's probably, like as we saw today, there's not that many people who are excited about attending the bylaws committee meeting.
Okay.
So I hopefully we can have an agenda prepared
Yes.
by Tuesday.
Good to know.
and-
I will prepare a more detailed agenda and send it out individually to the members for comment, and then send it to you, Jeff, for the meeting notice. But what I'm thinking while we're all on there is that we will go through again the conflict of interest quickly, the report from Tom and Michael's committee, and talking about input and process further, and then a brainstorm of ideas. So I do want to also have a report to go out to the committee. If it's okay with everybody, I would like to call Sarah Absher and talk to her about this one recommendation that we're making, and make sure she doesn't have an objection to that, and see if we could get a quick turnaround from the attorney, so that when we present to the CAC, we already have the approval, and they could just go ahead and vote at the Tuesday at our October meeting. Does that sound fair?
It does.
Okay.
Does it?
Any objections to that?
It sounds good.
Yeah, I was going
Okay.
to ask you to do that.
Okay. And then, so that's an action item that's coming out that we will summarize here. If it's okay, Michael, I'd like to go ahead and just stick with our September 8th meeting at 9:30, and we will, any input you have for brainstorming and the process, Tom can report out on the process, but on brainstorming, if you could please send me a list of things you'd like to have covered, we'll make sure that we include that in the discussion. And I'm sure we will be incorporating future input on all of that in
Yeah.
future meetings as well. So
Yeah.
does that sound okay?
I can certainly make the beginning of that meeting, and
Okay, great.
perhaps for an hour. If it were 9 o'clock, it'd be even easier for me.
Okay.
But
All right.
I was going to suggest, we could make it either Friday or Saturday by choice, just in case things happen. I don't know.
I think
anyway.
because of the notice, we have to stick to a date.
Okay, sounds fine.
So,
I will be here regardless at the beginning of the meeting.
okay. And if it turns out that Fridays are going to be problematic for people going forward, we could re-look at this so that we'll have time to renotice for future meetings. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does Jeff send out a separate notice for each meeting, or?
He does.
Well, I was just saying that I actually want to
for the CAC meetings.
Right. Yeah. Like.
Yes, but I mean, you just do one meeting at a time. You don't send out and just say it's a second and fourth Friday.
I mean, I probably will say that, and I'll say the next one, like the next 2 are these dates. Oh, that's probably what.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the CAC notices go out each time. We're going to be incorporated in their regular ones going forward. So,
and then Jeff,
agendas, the agenda will be included. I guess the agenda has to be included in these notices, right? But I guess if we just say they're
Hmm.
going to be talking about bylaws changes in general, we don't need to get that specific in terms of publishing, do we?
I mean, what OPML says is like you have to provide enough information so that someone who might be considering attending knows whether there's something they would
Okay.
want to attend for.
Okay.
And I think in the case of bylaws, that's probably pretty like I think as much detail as you can, but
Right.
like not very much detail is probably sufficient, especially at this stage where you're just kind of talking about how you're going to work and mostly and getting
Right.
ramped up and getting very
Because otherwise
in
we're going
place.
to run into, you're going to have to send out a meeting notice for each one if we have to have a separate agenda for each one.
Mhm.
So, okay. Moving on. So hearing no objections, we will set the future meeting dates on Fridays, the second and fourth Friday of the month, 9:30 to 11, beginning September 8th. Public comment. Jack and Tom, do you have any input for us?
Somebody needs to talk. How are you all? I'm, if I can go ahead.
Please.
I'm Tom Perhodich, and for your all's purposes, you can call me Tom too, and by far the least significant Tom for your purposes. I'll give you a little bit of background about me, only as it relates to what I'm going to say in a second. I'm a political scientist. I was a college professor for a while. I'm now a Texas lawyer, have been for 3 decades. I'm not a licensed Oregon lawyer. I listened to all of you that are retired, and you're retired. I'm 71 years old, and I'm still working largely remotely. I supported. I was also one of 5 members on the short-term rental committee that made recommendations, did surveys, then made recommendations to both the county and the community. And that was, we could talk about division later and who's responsible for it, but that process is not over. It's ongoing, as will be the community plan. But I supported each of you, and in fact, when Jeff suggested at the last NCAC meeting that we let all 6 members, all the people that were running, that all of them could be on the committee, I supported that because I did some due diligence. I've heard Nancy and Susan and Tom speak. Tom is a neighbor. I did some due diligence. I read your submissions. For those of you who were at the meeting, I listened to you, and I just didn't think it was fair that whoever finished 6th would not be a member of this committee given their qualifications. That would have been entirely unfair, in my view, arbitrary and random. And I can tell you, if that's what you're taking to Sarah and Bill Sargent, they will pass on that in a minute. That's a simple phone call. The reason that I supported all of you, but I should also say this. I'm one of the 2 leaders of Save Our Neighborhoods, which is an advocacy group for the most part for residents, but not exclusively residents. And if I didn't think that you could all be impartial, and I don't mean to be condescending here, that you couldn't be impartial, open-minded, and fair, I would have taken a different position at the last meeting. I'm impressed today, as I was impressed at the NCAC meeting, about everyone's qualifications. This is a good group. I know you'll be transparent, open-minded, and fair. I would also ask you to be very, very sensitive to particularly procedural rules that affect voting, because they may be contentious, probably will be contentious, and just the whole procedure. The reason I said I'm a political scientist and a lawyer by vocation, I know that procedural rules, as you know, rules can affect substance. And so, the only thing I would ask is that you kind of learn, those of you that haven't spent as much time in the community. Bill has been here for 63 years, apparently. I've only owned property here for 20 years. So again, I don't mean to be condescending, but be sensitive to the different positions that exist in the community, and understand, as I know you'll seek to do, the consequences of your decision making and what you recommend to the NCAC. Ultimately, it's the membership of the NCAC that will vote, and that's a bulwark against anything, I think, and the democratic way to do it. So I just couldn't allow there not to be one public comment, but I congratulate you on your applaud what you're doing. I do think it's a good group. One thing, we didn't know at the time of the short-term rental committee that we had to follow Oregon public meeting laws. If we had to follow Oregon public meeting laws, we would either never gotten anything done, or if we'd gotten it done, we would have gotten it done more quickly, because a lot of the contention that existed at different points during that 1.5-year process would have probably been abated. But in any event, good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate your input. Jack, do you have any comments that you'd like to make? Okay, I think hearing none.
Jack is muted. Jack is muted.
Jack, you're muted. If you'd like to comment, we can't hear you right now. Okay, Jack does not have to comment. So I think to summarize the meeting for the report to the NCAC and set action items is that we got started. We've set up a committee a subcommittee of Tom and Michael to look at the process for gathering input and allowing people to provide input. We've decided we're going to set up a webpage with Jeff's help, and I will work with Jeff on that initial, and he will reach out to whoever he needs to. People are going to send their phone numbers to me if they wish, so that we can do one-on-one discussions. We reviewed the Oregon public meeting laws so that we can know how we operate and that we are allowed to talk one-on-one with one another. We have discussed initial process. We appointed me chair, and Michael scribe. We passed a motion to do an initial recommendation to the membership to change the committee number from between 3 to 5 to between 3 and 7, and authorize me to discuss that with Sarah and the county attorney prior to the October CAC meeting, where we can present that recommendation. We deferred the bylaws change brainstorming to the next meeting on September 8th. We set our calendar to the second and fourth Friday of the month at from 9:30 to 11 going forward, and we'll hold those as necessary. There are probably a couple of other things. I'll go through the get Michael's notes, but and we held public comment. Anything that I have forgotten to mention?
I don't think we deferred the brainstorming as much as we just agreed to continue it. It seems like we had quite a bit of brainstorming.
Well, that's true. We did in other agenda items. So good point. So we agreed to continue the brainstorming at the next meeting. If anybody would like to submit brainstorm ideas ahead of time to me, I could just have that on the agenda that we put online as well for us to talk about, and I could do a little grouping, but you don't have to. We can actually do a brainstorming in our next meeting.
How did Jeff send the updated bylaws? I didn't see an email yet. Was it?
He chatted. So in the chat, if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a chat button on, at least on my computer, there's a chat button. And if you click on that, there's a box that should come up with his link.
Got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, any other final items? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank
Nice
you,
to meet
Nancy.
all of you.